now just a little bit late. I won't walk you through the agenda. You've had it for a couple of days. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Quickly, I'm going to say good evening, Anthony. Nice to see you. And with that, I think, Rob, I'm going to just hand it over to you to do the task force update, please.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, my name is Rob Carr-Lindsay. I'm the city manager for the city of Kenmore. First, I want to let you know that after I spoke with him last night, Lou Novak agreed to resign, or not last night, last week. Sorry about that. Lou Novak agreed to resign from the Financial Sustainability Task Force. I did not approve of his response and comments during the introductions at the beginning of the task force meeting. And more than ever, we need to be a welcoming and inclusive city where all people can feel safe and comfortable in sharing their life experiences, especially in settings like our task force meetings. Too often, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, along with other marginalized groups, have been interrupted or attacked when they have expressed how they experience racism, discrimination, and exclusion in their lives. Instead, we need to be open, actively listen, and let others know that they are safe and welcome to have the floor and say what's on their mind. So that's my statement about Lou's resignation. Given that either tonight or tomorrow night will be your last meeting as a task force, I'm not going to fill that vacant position. So, all right. So as far as process goes, you as a task force have worked really hard. You had that few-month break, but even with that few-month break, you've had a lot of meetings. I think you've had 7 meetings so far. And you've gotten a lot of information. You've gotten a lot of feedback from the community through the statistically valid survey that we did and public input. And tonight you're going to get an update on the Balancing Act tool and the data that we collected from that. After that, hope you can roll up your sleeves and dig into discussing some solutions that will arrive at a balanced budget for the next 6 years. Steve Toller of Management Partners will be on hand to help you with that discussion. What he'll be able to do is he'll be able to plug in your suggestions and your what ifs into his tool in real time and show you on a graph what that does to the lines crossing. One thing I think you should keep in mind is, as you've heard me say probably many times, the city has built up substantial reserves, more than it's required to, and probably more than your typical city. Not only do we have the amount in the general fund that Steve shows in his graphs, but we have about 2.5 to 3 million in Strategic Opportunities Fund, which is not restricted. And we also have the Rainy Day Fund, which we also call the Strategic Reserve Fund, which has about 1.2 million in it. And so I'm not saying this is how you should do it, but one thought when you're balancing this budget, given that there is a pandemic going on and given that people are hurting right now, one thought is to not take any revenue actions now or in the next year or 2 or 3. You can step or tier your plan or your recommendations over multiple years. City of Shoreline did that in their financial sustainability plan. They adopted one back in 2014. And for example, I'm not saying this is what you should do, but for example, back in 2014, they said they would enact a B&O tax on businesses in 2019. They are following their plan, and they did. They enacted a B&O tax on businesses in 2019. I'm not saying that you should enact that specific tax. I'm just saying that's an example of how you can step and tier things over multiple years. Because remember, the goal is to keep our lines crossing out in 2026 and keep the big 2026 problem from happening. Could you dip into reserves a little bit here in these next couple of years? I think you could. Am I saying you have to? No, you as a task force need to come up with your own thoughts and recommendations on that. So with that, I will turn it back over to Jim.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go to public comments. So I'm going to need your help here, Tila, because I can see all the task force and staff people's names on here, but I can't see at the moment anybody from the public. And I guess I would just ask, is there anyone who did not just now attend the community open house who's attending this evening's meeting, having not had any opportunity to speak, who would like to say something?
So if you'd like to, if you could just raise your hand through the Zoom interface, should be an option. If you're looking at the participant screen or at the bottom of your screen. So far, no one is raising their hand. Oh, we got one. Mike M.
Sir, do you want to go ahead?
Mike M., go ahead and give your comments.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to the meeting tonight. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Sir.
Wonderful, thank you. I wanted to make a point about the balancing act tool that was distributed to folks in Kenmore. There was a line item on the balancing act tool about giving the public input on whether or not the ball fields lease at Bastyr University should be continued and what the cost savings might be for that. I believe it was showing 1 and 2 year cost savings for that decision, but I wanted to make the point as a former member of the North Lake Little League, which is Kenmore's own Little League executive board, that the Bastyr ball fields are the only full-size baseball fields that support all ages of Little League play. The Little League in Kenmore has, I believe, just over 700 registrants or players, although they did not play this year because of the pandemic. The Bastyr ball fields is also the largest set of fields used by the North Shore Youth Soccer Association, NYSA, in Kenmore, and it serves children from 5 years old all the way up to 16, 17 years old. So those are critically important assets for our city and youth sports programs. And as you're looking at the balancing act feedback that you get from the community, I wanted to make that point, that those are a critical part of our youth sports organizations.
Good, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? I'm not seeing it. Anybody? Do I have
Danny
that right?
Howe.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Howe?
Sorry, Danny, I think I muted you right as you unmuted yourself.
Okay, how does that sound?
We can hear you.
Perfect, yeah.
Great. Hey, I'm just on a cell phone, so my apologies if this comes across roughly. I just wanted to thank the group, the team here, for looking at what is a very tough task, you know, especially during these economic times. I've had the pleasure of spending at least the last 8 years working in youth sports around the city, and it's a labor of love. I think we've mentioned this before, but organizations like North Lake Little League, for example, which serves, you know, hundreds of children every year, are all volunteer driven. And so to be able to keep those nonprofit organizations afloat, it really is a balancing act of trying to bring in as many volunteers as possible, but also trying to keep fees low, especially for working class families and families of color. So just wanted to mention, I know that there's been conversation around the leases at Bastyr. As a longtime board member, those fields are critical for us to be able to survive as an organization. And you know, Little League Baseball is a partnership with I think the city and parents and with stakeholders across the city. And I think it's important to note that minus those fields, we may not have Little League Baseball or softball in our community, which I think is a very, very sad thought. So I know it's approximately $55,000 a year. I think Little League wants to do its part to be able to support those fields, and we do, having been there many times and spent many late evenings working on those fields. But I just wanted to reiterate what Mike had said also, is that it's such an important part of growing up in our community, and we would really appreciate your support if you could support the continuing leases for those fields. Thank you.
Thank you. And just because of the press of time tonight, I'm going to ask, is there anyone who would like to speak quickly to the task force who's not addressing the issue of the ball fields at Bastyr? Both Mike and Danny were very articulate, but is there another subject that anybody wanted to ask or talk about to the task force?
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, well, we are running a little bit behind, so why don't we move on then? Thank you from the members of the public, because it looks like there's about 16 of you here. Thank you for being here tonight to follow the deliberations of the task force.
Hey, Jim, this is Rob. Can I talk a little bit more about process?
Yes, okay.
Okay. So I think most of the task force members were part of the open house just now, but for those of you who weren't, the idea is for you to, this evening, right after you get the balancing act results, to get into discussions about a recommendation for a 6-year balanced forecast. If you don't have time to finish it tonight, we have tomorrow night as a spillover meeting, and we've already publicly noticed it, so it's all ready to go for tomorrow night as a meeting. I'm not saying you have to meet tomorrow night. If you can wrap it all up tonight, that's awesome. But if you need tomorrow night, know that you can have it. Then what we'll do is we'll take your recommendations and bring them forward to the city council meeting, which is going to be a special retreat that they're going to have. It's going to be an online Zoom retreat on September 10th at 5:30 p.m. It'll be a budget retreat that night. And your recommendations and Steve Toller's recommendations and possibly my recommendations, if I disagree with everybody's, will move forward. But anyway, I just want to thank you all for your service. You know, you're all volunteers, and your time is so valuable. I know that, and I realize that, and I just want to say thank you for all the time you've given this.
Thank you, Rob. I have had a couple task force members tell me they would rather work till 4 or 5 tomorrow morning than meet tomorrow night. So we'll see how it goes. Now, just teasing. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit. Actually, we just wanted to ask all of you on the task force for a couple minutes. What were your impressions of the public comment that you heard this evening? Did you have any reactions or any thoughts about just the process of involving the public in this?
I just love that the city's so engaged that I thought Joanne's comment about the company that provides the balancing act tool saying that they've never had a city engage as much as we have. I think that speaks to how much people care about what happens in the future of our city. So that is a really positive thing for me, that we can all come together to compromise and figure out a way forward to keep the city going. So I was really pleased with all of that.
Good, thanks. Anybody else?
Hey, I'm sorry, John Hendrickson just called me. He said that his hand was raised and he was not able to comment. So would it be okay to hear him comment?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. So John, are you on at the meeting now?
He is, let's see. Right there, John?
I see you. Yep, there you
Yep,
go.
we can see you.
All right, you guys, thank you. I know this might be the last meeting. I would ask you guys to take a step back and really look at this process and question if it's really a healthy, objective process that's clear and informative. And is this the kind of process we are going to have going forward, because this, you know, this is just the beginning of what we need to do as far as working with the public. So, you know, historically, we've had a process that is been flawed and one that you couldn't trust. And so, you know, I gave you guys the 1997 feasibility study. And if you look at that income statement, we had $1.7 million in operating surplus. And that's what we were told the voters we were going to have. And it was going to make up something like 80% of our capital projects funding. But if you go back to page 159, it says that the sales tax equalization revenue, which is 20% of your revenue, will predictably diminish over time, that we don't advocate the city rely on this funding source. And from the beginning, you would be wise to develop a strategy for the shortfall. And that funding went away. We lost 20% of our revenue by 2001 with I-695. So, sorry about that. So if you look at, I mean, do you guys really have a handle on this, or are you just, are you working with blinders on? You know, we, our lines crossed for the first time in 2010, our expenses exceeding revenue, while we still underfunded our road pavement by 1.49 million. And if we had been funding our pavement all along, our lines were crossed every year. And you're being suggested as one of the things over and over again, hey, should we underfund our pavement? Well, to me, they're really asking you to go along with what has really been a corrupt process of taking our road tax money, not funding roads, and funding City Hall, funding 4 times as many people as we're told we can afford to hire. And if you go along with that, you're really validating what's been going on for the last 20 years. You should remember that the city wouldn't even discuss road taxes or road problems until 3 pedestrians were killed in a 4-month period. Then they started to talk about road safety, but still don't admit to the road taxes. We should really look at the public works building they wanted to buy for $6 million. Did you guys factor that in? That was going to cost $300,000 a year in principal, $270,000 in interest, $570,000. I don't think it's even in your projections.
It is.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Mr. Hendrickson. We do have another person with their hand raised. Are we still doing comments?
Well, if it's just one more person, why don't we
Okay.
honor
So Nadia Silver. You want to unmute? See, I see you. I don't hear you.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
I stopped
Yes.
the video because I don't, and my hair looks like crap. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you guys for handling the Lou situation, and to know that you guys actually do care about your committee members and community and their reaction to racism that's broad and out in the open. We fight racism on the daily, out in the open or in secret, and I'm just nice to know that financial committee is right along with us.
Thank you very much. Let's go back. Any of the task force members want to just make any comments about your reactions to the public comment we've heard tonight through the open house?
I'll make one comment. Oh, unless Fernell.
Go ahead.
I just, there are some people who have made comments that the process is not transparent, or that the city has not worked in good faith, or that things, I just want to speak as a member of the task member that the information that I've been given, I feel like I'm a CPA. I feel like I'm pretty sophisticated in financial and data analysis. The information that we've received has been excellent. Our questions have been answered. The city staff has been very thoughtful. So I've just had a very, very positive experience with being a member of the task force. And I just want to make clear to any people who are listening, any attendees, that my experience as a CPA, as someone who does this professionally, I've been very impressed with the process and appreciate all the work that's been done. And I think that the city is doing good work here. So glad to be participating. And appreciate all of the comments, but I did want to paint that picture from my perspective.
Thank you. And Fernell?
Hi, thank you. Again, just reiterating some more, and as not a CPA or financial expert, I'm just encouraged, impressed by the willingness, creativity, the hand open concept to be able to draw people to Kenmore. I remember our, when I was little, we used to have the theater, the outdoor theater, and what a draw that was, and which made us a unique place to be and live. And I think those are just some of the, tapping into some of those ways and thoughts and resources to include us all and keeping that, equity lens at the forefront. And you know how I feel about the youth, and if we can draw things around them, for them, to them, then we're going to be a healthy community if we keep the youth at our center. So I appreciate those thoughts and avenues to do that. So appreciate hearing everybody's comments.
Thank you, Fernell. I'm not seeing any other task force members raise their hand. So again, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to Joanne because she wanted to present to you an overview of the initial findings from the Balancing Act.
Thank you, Jim. I did see Lynn raise her hand if she wanted to comment now.
Sure, I can be quick.
Oh, Lynn, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can be quick. I just wanted to let folks of the community know that the task force has worked really hard. Speaking for myself, I read the entire city budget document, and that's a big document. We've looked at all of the data, the city survey. I've listened to council meetings. I've listened to the public feedback at various council meetings during this process. And the city has reached out to the entire community with mailings and all of the other forms of communication. So, I think that we're doing the very best that we can to balance some challenging circumstances with competing needs and interests, and just trying to listen to all that feedback and render some thoughts going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thanks. Okay, so unless there's anybody else with their hand up, Joanne, do you want to proceed?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Hi, council or task members. I wanted to ask Jim, how much time do I have for this, or how much are we behind the agenda already?
Well, we gave you about 15 minutes, okay, and we're about 10 minutes behind.
Okay.
But I've seen your presentation. I think it will benefit people, so maybe it's a little matter of speaking a bit faster, but let's.
Okay.
You should go ahead.
I will. I'll be as quick as I can, and maybe as the evening progresses, if people want to go back in and look in more detail, because this Balancing Act tool is just chock full of data. So I'm going to share my screen. And I hope what you are seeing is the projection that shows that the city is in a deficit, $972,000. Can someone confirm this is what they're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to start here and say that this is the tool that was presented to the public using the management partners projections for the next biennium, that the 2-year deficits would total $972,000. And they were asked to provide simulations which would balance the budget using a variety of scenarios in revenue and expenditures. So the outcome that I want to show you tonight is this. And the organization that produces the Balancing Act tool is called Engaged Public. And I think that is what we've seen with this tool. It's not the end-all be-all to balance the budget, but it is a very good tool for gathering public perception and thoughts and comments and ideas, and also providing a little bit of education. So what this tells us right at the top is that 218 balance simulations were submitted, and that is really outstanding. We've never had 218 people at a meeting, or especially a budget meeting, ever. They spent an average of 17 minutes working on the simulation, which is, again, a really great benchmark. And views of pages. A lot of people visited the site and maybe clicked on different options and didn't complete a simulation, but there were 778 page hits. So I was just totally blown away by this. I think it's excellent, and the folks at that do the balancing act tool thought so too. There's a lot of demographic data here. I don't know that it's going to help you a lot, so I'm just going to scroll through it. It shows where people access the tool, but this gets us down to some summary data that I think very high level will give you a sense of what people were thinking about. So this graph shows how the expenses were viewed by the participating public. The gold bars are what was presented in an actual simulation that was submitted online, and the green bars, or teal, however you're seeing them, were the results of people just clicking in the simulation tool, but didn't really present a balanced scenario. But they're fairly consistent in most cases. So this shows that if you look at general government, the average submission decreased general government expenditures by $130,000. And the median submission, which is the middle value of all the submissions, was $156,000. I can't get it to stay still, so I hope you can see that. So I think that was pretty telling that general government was something that people felt like they wanted to reduce. The next major category was police service. Back up here. And you can see that bar looks pretty significant, and the axis down below will give you some perspective on dollars. So when looking at the police services category, average submissions indicated that that should be decreased by about $431,000, or just a little bit over 5%. The median decrease was $178,000, not quite so much. And the median decrease is the gold button right under the gold bar. So again, that's pretty consistent that there was a perception that police services in some way, shape, or form should be a candidate for reduction. And then finally,
Can you just keep in mind, these are all 2-year numbers. So like cutting police by 400 some odd thousand, that's 200,000 a year, right, Joanne?
that's right. I'm sorry I didn't say that up front. I assumed, probably not properly, that everyone had already seen the Balancing Act tool or gone through it. Maybe not. It was all based on our 2-year budget, which is what we're getting ready to prepare right now. So these numbers are 2-year numbers. And then the final expense category was public works, and the average submission decrease, again, here there was a decrease of $224,000, which is about a 0.8%. So this small bar right here. And actually people who clicked around but didn't balance the budget wanted to, kind of resulted in an average increase to that expenditure line. So this kind of gives you a higher level look at what the sentiment was regarding expenses without getting into the detail, which there is detail to support this, but this is a high level overview. And I sent you all a picture of these graphs earlier today, just so you could see them a bit ahead of time. When we move to the revenue charts, you can see here, now these are all indicating a feeling of increasing rather than decreasing. So taxes, the average submission was to increase taxes about 2.4%. That was the average submission. And the median increase was actually more than that, 4.5%, or $947,000, again, over 2 years. We didn't have any interaction with fees and intergovernmental because we don't have any control over intergovernmental, which is like state distributions to us for certain taxes and some of the state and local grants that we receive. And fees are really so complex that I didn't want to make any scenarios there for input, but it would be things like development fees and permitting fees, plan check, that kind of thing. So in the other category, again, we had a net increase in our average submissions of 375,000 and a median submission of 1.3. So again, the taxes seem to engender positive increases in the spending. Of course, people are looking to reduce. So and this will give you the dollar values of all the revenues, taxes, and other had a net increase. No one submitted a simulation where they reduced revenues. And on the expense side, the average of all the expenses that were increased are these numbers, because not everyone wanted to cut everything, and not everyone wanted to increase everything. So there's a little bit of both here, and this table summarizes the average of the increases and decreases. Skip this next section, it's not very interesting. You can't see these categories very well because I can barely see them, but these are links where we can go down into more detail within each of the categories and subcategories, which I'll show you in a minute. And then this is kind of a cool IP chart that shows where people were pinging from when they filled out the simulations. We've got one odd person that lives down here in Fremont, but you can see how this looks for our area. I guess that would be what you would expect. And
that's where they work, Joanne.
That's where they're working from home. Could be, very much could be, but just kind of for fun. And then we had some sort of just softball exit questions of not a lot of help for you. The next thing I wanted to show you real quick is the subcategories. So we have fees, general government, intergovernment, other. These were the subcategories that you saw: police services, public works, and taxes. So looking at taxes, and if you recall, there were a number of subcategories within taxes that we presented. Here's a chart that kind of gives you just an overview of the magnitude of increases in different categories. Property, we didn't give you an opportunity for sales tax, but property tax, the sales tax option for transportation, there were some utility tax what ifs, and some admission tax what ifs, and the data for all of those is right here. I just don't know how appropriate it is to take very long looking at this. But if we went down into, say, utility tax, for instance, you can get a little bit more detail. And this was a scenario question that was posed, and these are the responses. This was the question: should we increase utility taxes on gas and electric from 4% to 6%? And how much that would generate. Of all the people who submitted a simulation, these are their responses, and it was a 91% no. Now, that's not to say that you saw a net dollar increase. The people who said yes, that they generated a dollar amount average that would be, but in number of responses, 91% did not choose this as an area to increase. And then you can see there were comments provided for this particular question, and in just about every element of the Balancing Act tool, folks were able to leave comments. And I didn't count the comments, but I believe there were probably 100 or 200. People that engaged public said they had never had a jurisdiction elicit as many comments to their Balancing Act tool as we had, which I think is probably representative of pent-up energy and pent up desire to participate.
Yeah,
So-
up against cities like Tacoma and Denver, is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's used all over the country, big cities and small. And, you know, for an effort this year that we're trying to make to engage the public, I think that this really let people in to see a little bit of what our budget really looks like. So I don't know if you want me to take time to go into each of these subcategories. I can certainly do that.
You know that table that, or the graphs that Steve prepared today, I think summarized them quite nicely.
Okay. I will switch to those then. Oh, I'm so slow with this. Stop sharing my screen. Okay, I'm back with the group, right?
Yep.
Okay. Finding my cursor, sharing my screen again, and that would be this screen. So this, you should now see a screen with 3 charts on it. Is that correct?
Not yet. Not
No.
yet. Click share.
Oh, I have to click share down there. Okay. How's
There you go.
How'd you know?
Okay. Now, Steve was kind enough to put these charts together from the Balancing Act tool today. He did very quickly. I was pretty impressed. And this showed the preferences within the revenue and expenditure categories, if I'm correct in interpreting that, Steve.
Yeah, can you zoom in on it so that way people can see it, Joanne?
Yes.
So basically, yep. So basically what this did is this reported back to us what was the percent of people that when they submitted a balancing budget, a balanced budget, what percent of people included each of these strategies. And so on the revenue side, 29% of the people that submitted a balanced budget included traffic photo enforcement. 22% included the 2% or 0.2% local sales tax for transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see kind of more an ordinal ranking which of these strategies seem to be used by the most people. And I wouldn't necessarily look at it as 29%. That means 71% said no. It's just that when people had to make the choices themselves of being able to balance the budget, 29% decided to include that strategy. It's not necessarily that the others said, I wouldn't want to do that. It's just that they chose not to use that strategy in their balancing of the budget. So that's the way that we've kind of read that. So this first graph shows then, those that, from a revenue enhancement perspective, and the top 5 were traffic photo enforcement, the sales tax, admissions tax, the new utility tax on cable, and property tax. The property tax one was, I believe, the banked levy, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yep. Okay. And then on the expenditure side, again, there was reductions and enhancements, increases. So in this one, the reductions were, reduce the amount of budget for events. That was by about 60% of the people included that. Recreation coordination, the school resource officer, looking at contracted police services and reducing the amount of money we're spending for contracted police services. And then this 5th one, and there's been a lot of talk about this, and I want to clarify that the question asked, should the city not discontinue the lease, but instead should the city look to shift costs of the use of those ball fields to the users of those fields? That's what the question was. And so this one had 36%, and then you see where it goes from there.
Can I jump in on that? And to be fair, what happened is we asked the question incorrectly for most of the Balancing Act was open. We asked, should the lease be discontinued, and we shouldn't have asked it that way, and that's the way it was asked for most of the time that Balancing Act was open. And also it showed it under other, and other had 500,000 or some number like that. So it made it at first glance, it made it look like the Bastyr ball fields were 500,000 a year or something, which they weren't. They're 55,000 a year. That's the cost of the lease. So we did change the wording of the question, but not till later last week, where we changed it to should there be a cost shift of the cost of the lease from the city to the users. But again, that change wasn't made until late.
Well, that was for the that was the intent of the strategy from when we had developed that strategy. And then finally is the area, any expenses that should be increased. And you see again here, mental health resources, almost half of the people said that the city should be spending more there, which I think is more than zero right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So then affordable housing, climate change initiatives, et cetera. So people were making choices to include some expenditure increases, making choices to, either reduce expenditures or look at revenue enhancements as a way to do that. So anyways.
Yeah, so some of these expenditures, people had, some questions were presented in such a way as, should we add this to the budget? Some were asked in such a way that it's already in the budget, should we increase or decrease?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to level set, did everybody that submitted something, did it balance? I just wonder if there was any that had a significant surplus or a significant deficit that still submitted.
Everybody that submitted, the tool would not let you submit a budget with a deficit. You either had to be balanced or with a surplus.
Right. Okay, I'll stop sharing that screen now unless there are any questions regarding those charts.
I did want to ask it. Does anybody have a couple of quick questions about what Joanne just presented?
Okay, I can go back to sharing the balancing act if there are questions that folks would like to ask about that or any particular element of it or any of the specific questions. I'll keep it open for a few minutes, or the task force could start having their discussion, and at any time I could dive into one of these options and we could explore it more.
Why don't we proceed that way? Because I didn't, unless I missed it, and I might have, I didn't see that anybody had their hand raised or wanted to make a comment. I think this was helpful. Okay, good. So we are moving on to the session where the ball is in your court, task force members. We want to hear from you tonight about your initial ideas, about where the or how the city might balance the budget and create long-term financial sustainability. Mike went ahead and wrote out some things and sent them to us today. And I looked at it, and I'm not commenting on his ideas other than to say it looked to me like he had done a great job just putting together some ideas. So I thought, well, why doesn't he be the role model and go first? And we have the benefit of having Mike go first, and then we'll just ask the rest of you too. So Mike, I'm going to turn it to you.
Well, there's lots of reasons why I shouldn't go first, but here we go anyway. I think, first of all, this came out really thinking through some of the response to Rob's comments earlier. I think we're in a really good position. I'm happy to see that we have these reserves out here right now that are available, because they do in fact give us flexibility that we need, I think, to stage in the most thoughtful of the options we have. And when I think through and looked at and thought about what those options are, the more the ones that I think have the longest or the best ability to have substantial improvement in our situation over time are going to take time themselves to be worked through and implemented. So I'm glad the reserves gives us that flexibility. Part of what I've been doing, and quite frankly, my long suppressed budget director's ethos has kind of crawled back to the surface uncomfortably as we've gone through this. But one of the exercises I put myself through was to try and think again about what the root causes of the structural deficit are. We all know what we've got here is we've got a misbalance between our expense growth, which is expected to be about 3% a year, against our revenue growth, which is really based on a fixed property base and can't grow more than 1% a year without some significant changes. So that tension, I think, is what, in my mind, I've spent time thinking about. And one of the places my mind went was that really, what are the drivers behind that structural deficit? Why is our expense growth the way it is? And why is that so out of line with our revenue base? And thinking about what we could do, particularly starting on the expense side. And I went through, I think like other people did, going through the tool and thought about the expense budget. But you know, the more I thought about it, the administrative cost, really there's a limit to how much you can cut there. At some point, you're going to just get to the point where you really lose the value of having the city at all. We can't really reduce, and I think would want to reduce, the services and the goods that we receive out of government below a certain level. And when I started playing with the tool, what I quickly came to was the conclusion that you really couldn't cut most of those expenses very far before you get quickly out of the fat and into the bone. Yes, we should look at those. I think it's prudent to do that, and I think there's probably some gains we could make there. But I don't, in my thinking at least, think that expense reductions are really going to get us where we need to be. So I began to think some more about really what is driving a lot of that structural deficit. And yeah, we do need a balance of expense and control, but when I came back to it, it really is going, in my mind, it's going to eventually take some sort of revenue solution. We've got the flexibility currently in our reserves to be able to take the time to think through that and implement it in a thoughtful way over time. But I think that's where it's going to be. But that underlying structural deficit, one of the things I began to think about, and this comes out of some of the work I was involved with in the past in the Planning Commission, is that we really have a situation in Kenmore where we have to support services for folks who really are non-residents. And that's very costly to us. So that includes things like roads, 522 and Juanita Drive. If you travel on any of those roads any day or morning, you can see very clearly that people who don't live here are using those roads for various purposes. But we're, as a city, are in a situation where we have to maintain those roads. Public safety. Along with those roads comes in traffic control and accident response. Again, we're providing those services to people who travel through, don't live in the city, and don't have any financial accountability for those expenses. Parks, and also, I think we as citizens of Kenmore, we enjoy our parks. On any one given day, I think we're using those parks. But at the same time, I've noticed over a period of time that the use in those parks is increasingly by regional level by people who don't live here. And of course, then they're not supporting the cost of those parks. Even St. Edward's, which is not supported financially by Kenmore, in order to get to that park, you've got to drive, and you've got traffic, and you've got streets that need to be maintained. And so even for St. Edward's, Kenmore is subsidizing the use of non-residents. Unfortunately, there is no legal, to my knowledge, way to directly tax non-residents to cover their share of the support. But there are some revenue options that would pass at least a portion of these costs to non-residents. For instance, a sales tax, 0.2% add-on to the fund to fund street maintenance. We could pass that. That wouldn't necessarily impact non-residents in an equitable way, but to the extent that they are in our city, as they're not just passing through, if they stay here, they're going to incur some of that sales tax, whether through its meals or other purchases. Photo enforcement cameras. My initial reaction was, no way, this is terrible. But you know, then I thought about it some more, because if you think about it, there could be a very substantial benefit here to Kenmore citizens. Increasing traffic safety. With the tolling on 520 and 405, we've seen a significant increase in traffic through our city, particularly on the main arteries, 522 and Juanita Drive. I use those myself in rush hour and after, and the character of that traffic has changed substantially since then. I don't think it's as safe as it used to be. If you've had the same experience I have of people tailgating you, wanting to go 50, 60 miles an hour on these routes to get wherever they want to get, photo enforcement cameras would help reduce that. Decrease public safety costs. Well, if people are in a situation where they become more aware of when they're not complying with the rules and the laws, that's got to have a positive effect on both the cost and what we have as a city have to do to, just by reducing accident response itself. At the same time, it would generate significant revenue. The numbers I recall that I saw cited for the city of Lake Forest Park is after covering the operating costs, they're netting something like $1.2 million a year. I didn't see anything else that really came close to generating those kind of revenues. So I think it's worth a serious look. On the other hand, increase in property and utility taxes, it can yield significant new revenue. But one of the problems with increasing these taxes is it really doesn't have any real control, expenditure control or transparency on how those funds are used. There are some options though that could provide the same benefits in terms of revenue enhancement, but also provide additional transparency and actually control by the public of how those dollars are actually spent and ensure that those dollars are spent on high priority items, things that are of high priority to the citizens of our city. For instance, a metropolitan park district. We heard earlier from John, yes, it's expensive to implement, but there are advantages to it that I think need to be considered. It would provide a durable funding source exclusive and would be dedicated exclusively to park acquisition and maintenance. That would certainly relieve our general fund of significant dollars, but at the same time, through that board and the control that the citizens could have over that levy, we would be ensured that those dollars were actually spent for the purposes that we wanted them to. Similarly, a special purpose levy would provide similar durable and accountable, transparent funding sources. As the nature of a public special service, those revenues can be dedicated to priority services that are important to the citizens. That could include parks, streets, public safety. So I think those two things are worth thinking about. They don't take care of the non-resident free rider problem, but it does give us a certain amount of transparency that we don't have now. And it's a trade-off, I think, in return for accepting additional taxation, basically, we get increased control and transparency about how those dollars are used. I'll stop there, but those are my free-form thoughts. I look forward to hear what other people think.
Good, thank you, Mike. Who wants to go next?
I saw it.
I was not really sure where to get the hand. Like I said, I've got my camera set up as mirror image. This always messes with me. So I could send this to you, but I have this detailed analysis, which every item printed out with its pros and cons. But really what I tried to do is summarize it by going with a few principles. And, obviously I looked at all of the community feedback. I also looked at what the community values based upon what they said in the survey. And that's important. That's important information. But then, these are difficult decisions that the council is going to have to make. And we can't make that just based on what the community wants or doesn't want. And I hate to say it that way, but there are factors here that not everyone is aware of. There are changes in state regulations. There are all kinds of different changes to the economic situation. And quite frankly, our city is a different city than it was years ago. Whether we like it or not, it's a different city. There's different people, different population density, different needs and interests, and as I said earlier, different requirements from the state. So we simply have to balance all of those factors. And really that would be the primary principle of what I would recommend, and that's to really have a balanced approach of careful expense reduction and also careful revenue increase. And revenue increases can be done over many years. It doesn't have to be instantaneous, and I think having a plan in place to do that is very helpful. I think phasing in some of the banked capacity is really important over time. I mean, we just know for a fact that expenses always outpace revenue. I'm not even sure why we have banked capacity, that being the case. So I think we really need to look at that. Attention to cost reduction. I'm going to reverse one of the things I said before. I spent a fair amount of time looking at the recommendation for the city reorg. And I think that there were some really excellent suggestions there that, that could be done. Also, the alternate jail service, I think, would be not just for the purpose of finances, but the efficiency and effectiveness trade-off is really important. Utilizing officer time transporting to and from, it's not a good use of our resources. So along the lines of a changing city and a changing needs and regulations, I do believe the community has given us a lot of feedback that they'd like to see money for the SRO changed to a different purpose, to be more proactive, more preventative, more equitable. And I believe we're hearing that folks would like to see that on mental health services. The community, unfortunately, has said that recreation services is not the top priority for them. These are forced choices. We have to make choices. So it seems like some reduction in events and recreation services is prudent. I would be very careful about decreasing the level of service the city is providing if we're increasing revenue. Those two things don't really go together. And then the last thing I would say on that theme is some expense shifting or reduction can have a negative impact over time that compounds. Specifically, outsourcing maintenance, reducing street maintenance, those two things tend to have a long-term negative effect. My second theme is balance expense reduction with the generation of sustainable revenue, and I think I already spoke on that. My third theme or principle was be careful with revenue sources where it disproportionately impacts people in lower socioeconomic, with a lower socioeconomic status. Sales tax falls into that category. And then let's face it, human needs. We all need water, electric, gas, sewer. There's just not much we can do about that. So utility taxes on that has a disproportionate impact. Having said that, I am in favor of fees, and in particular, fees where we shift the expenses to people who are using the service the most. And the athletic fields is a really good example. No one wants to eliminate access to the athletic fields or eliminate youth sports. Tremendously important to our community. But what would be wrong with asking the users to increase the share of what they're paying for over, say, a 6-year period of time? Cable and solid waste are services that are to some degree discretionary, and we have control over how much of it we use. That would be a good utility increase. Admissions fees are user fees. And along with what Michael said about the traffic cameras, that can increase the safety for all the people passing through the city and driving at a high rate of speed and or running red lights. And correspondingly, that could be invested in our streets where we really need the money. And development fees are also a user fee. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you, Lynn. Jeff, were you going to go next?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. I'm kind of throwing something together that maybe will help us organize our thoughts as a task force and kind of actually come to a conclusion as I've been trying to take notes while building it. So so Lynn and Michael, if I didn't catch something that you have a feeling on, feel free to point it out. But and also let me know if you don't think that this is helpful or how we want to kind of frame this. So can you see my screen, what I'm looking at?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so what I've got is these, I started with the items that were laid out in the management partners presentation, expenses and then revenues down here, and then the fiscal impact, the potential of success, and then I'm building out a matrix here of the task members and kind of where we stand on these. And I agree with a lot of the sentiment. And my column here, I've been changing back and forth on many of these because there's just so much to consider with so many of these things, with where the city is, where the citizens are, and the priorities. But I was wondering if maybe we could kind of try to organize our thoughts as a task force in this way, and that will help get a sense of where people are at on any of these given issues, and then we can of course add new ones either based on the public feedback or the balancing act. There are a couple things that were on balancing act that were particularly those that were additions to the budget, like the mental health services and things like that, that would actually have a negative impact on the budget that we might want to include our thoughts on here. Anyway, so just to give you my overall thoughts, I agree with Lynn. I hear the public that ball fields are important, and I'm glad for the clarification that this would just be shifting the costs. And even if we passed on a portion of the costs, so that maybe the leagues could raise their fees for a portion of their of the participants, but then have their own program for those that are not able to pay the increased fees or something like that. But I do think passing some or more of these fees on to those makes sense. The reorganizing the city's org structure, I am of the opinion that generally cutting staff is like when you approach staff as we just need to cut costs, and so we need to cut people and we need to cut positions, you end up just having the people that you do have do more with less, and that ends up costing you in the end because you lose people or you lose expertise and things like that. And so I always hesitate with the idea of we just need to cut costs, we just need to cut costs. However, I think that Steve's team did an excellent job thinking about how to change the organization of it to actually fill the need of like the HR, the lack of an HR person, but also to kind of think about what positions could be moved or repurposed or reorganized in a way that is more efficient and focuses on the needs of the city. So so even though my general thought is that the city, my impression is that the city is working very lean already, that in fulfilling the services that the citizens are asking for and want. That did seem like a good suggestion. The utility taxes, and this is where Mike's comments, I agree with, that the idea of this firm 1% growth cap on our biggest tax revenue source is what causes this structural deficit. And so even if we come up with a financial sustainability plan for the next 6 years, eventually, especially when the economy comes back and we start seeing inflation again, those expenses are going to outpace our revenues again at some point. They'll have to have another task force. And so I had an initial hesitation with utility taxes but then thinking about it, and particularly looking at the comparisons sorry, this is a bit of a mess. I was trying to organize or trying to get everything on the same page. But the utility taxes were pretty low in compared to the other cities. And so, and this is where I feel like our tax burden could be higher as a city. Now might not be the time to really get excited about that, raising taxes next year, but this could be one of those things where we stage that in a couple years and say, okay, we're going to bring up our utility tax and have a utility tax on some of these to fund our city, because we need to pay taxes to fund our city and its programs. And these would keep pace with inflation better than some of these other sources that would be that are capped. So
Jeff, jump in for one quick sec.
Yeah, please.
On utility tax, yeah, they do tend to be more regressive.
Yeah.
They're harder on people with low income. I know that there are a number of cities that have a utility tax, and the way they address that is they offer a utility rebate or discount, and where people at a certain income level can come to City Hall and apply for a discount. Discounts are already available for low income at North Shore Utility District and Puget Sound Energy, but at Puget Sound Energy, your income has to be pretty darn low to qualify. And so cities have actually raised the eligibility threshold higher than what Puget Sound Energy has. And Puget Sound Energy's discount program, I believe, is funded through federal funding, which is why the income level needs to be so low in order to qualify. So just in a nutshell, you can get at the regressive nature of the tax by offering a discount or a rebate. There would be a staff implication.
Yep.
City staffing, we would need to have somebody so many hours a week to be able to process those applications for rebates or discounts. But I know that Bothell does, and there are a number of cities that do it, but I know that Bothell does for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point. My understanding is that many times those who are low income are under circumstances that they are least able to, they have the least capacity to apply for these kinds of programs and things like that. So even with the programs, and there's the staff implication, and there's also just making sure that everybody who would qualify for it can and does actually get it. Is always just on my mind, but yeah, that is an important point. But I agree with Lynn on things like cable and solid waste and some of these that are more like, cable TV is more of a luxury item. That if you're low income, the internet has replaced cable TV as our standard kind of baseline communication, which we're not taxing here. So it would definitely be for a tax on cable television. And then the other thing, the water, I'd be interested in understanding what the commercial use of water compared to residential, and the commercial electric and gas use. And what, like, would we be getting a higher portion of taxes from, say, the golf course on their water usage compared to residential? I have no idea what the proportion of those would be, and I'd be interested to see what burden we are putting on the citizens versus the commercial business things. Photo traffic enforcement, I go back and forth. I think Michael made a good point, made a good case, and I'm wavering on my no here. I think I'd want to know the specifics of where they would be and how it would, like what public safety we are trying to address. I don't love it as a revenue item, but I do, if we are doing it in a way that we actually believe that it's going to contribute to public safety, and isn't just going to be an annoyance, and make people curse Kenmore as they drive through. That's kind of where I'm at on that.
Can I just say one thing about the photo? I am waffling back and forth between yes and no as well, but last year we purchased a billboard on 522. So I had the travel impressions, and this is pre-COVID, but it's a 240,000 people per week that drive through Kenmore on 522, that Monday through Friday period, which is a pretty astounding number to me, that we're such a transient community. But that it made me go back and look while Michael was speaking about that, the sheer volume of people, and that's probably significantly reduced right now with so many folks working from home. But 68th and 522 is probably our busiest intersection. So that was an interesting just data point to look back on, but wanted to bring that up.
One of you asked where would it go? Our traffic engineer's first choice is 61st and Bothell Way. Not mainly for safety reasons. The observations and experiences he has with that intersection is he thinks it would do the most good for safety at that intersection. There's a lot of pedestrians crossing right there, and a lot of people trying to sneak through the light at the last minute. And through some just observations and other data he has, he thinks that would be the best intersection when it comes to improving safety.
When I was discussing this with my wife, she actually pointed out that specific intersection for those specific purposes, as we have crossed that street many times to go to the park. So, so that would be one of those cases that I would agree. Did you want to say something, Anthony?
Nope, just support that. That's a big bus commuter drop-off as well with the parking right at the church.
Yeah.
That cleared it up for me as well, because I'm waffling on that. I don't want to, tax unnecessarily, but the safety, if you could show me where the safety would go, and that would be my pick of where it would go, before I heard that, okay, that's where it would go. I'm like, well, that makes sense. That would clear up and say, okay, yes, I would put one there. And Jeff, I love the way your brain is thinking, the organization of the tool. That's exactly what I was having trouble with. Here's my, I'm not that fast, so I was doing a Lynn over here trying to capture it all. So I think it would even help to maybe start somewhere, start at the top, and then everybody to go through as we go down together. That would let us see where we need to finish up, tomorrow, or if we get to the bottom. If anybody's open to that, this is helping me track. So I'm jumping around with my thoughts and I can't hold all my thoughts and I want to say it all. And so just if we slow down and go down the list and go across for everybody, that might be a way to kind of go down the list and see where that leaves us at what time we're supposed to, 9 o'clock or so.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
As your facilitator, I do too. In fact, I'll probably offer Jeff a job 2 days from now. And I also just want to say that I do think that both Mike and Lynn have also articulated some really important principles that I've tried to capture. Or Mike, I've got your notes. Lynn, maybe you want to send me. I'll make sure we get those into this report. But why don't we continue this? Because even Jeff is doing real-time adding to this based on what the rest of you, his colleagues, are saying. So. Mm-hmm. Brunel, do you want to start us off? And
I'd love that. Yes, I'd love that. My side question, though, before I forget, got it written down if anybody, or before Steve has to go, I haven't heard anybody talk about St. Ed's and the hotel, the project that's going on, the renovation of the seminary up there. Is that on hold? I think I may be out of the loop on that one. I thought that was going to be a big revenue generator as they open up that. Was that something that anybody has discussed? Maybe it was in your earlier task force meetings or whatnot. Anyway, if you could put a note on that to come back later. I wanted to throw that out before I forgot about it, or if anybody had some, that would help. And as we're talking about generating revenue or or increasing revenue. I just wondered that we thought about that.
I'm just gonna have we did discuss that at a previous meeting. And Steve, I don't think you were gonna put that in the projections. Did you contemplate that in any of the projections?
No, unless it was something that was, you know, shovel ready type of a project development.
That was
we did not include it.
I know it was they were targeting for this summer, but I don't know with the pandemic and everything. And I'm not sure if Columbia Hospitality is still managing that property for the developer. But we did talk about occupancy taxes like they do in the city in Seattle as a possibility. So
yeah, but the problem with the TOT revenues, transient occupancy tax revenue, is that they have to be used for travel and tourism type of purposes. So we looked and talked about whether or not some of the economic development initiatives that the city is implementing could be somewhat shared there. But I think, you know, Rob, I think you were saying that it'd be a stretch in some cases.
Yeah.
So that we wouldn't get to take advantage of the city.
It wouldn't have a significant help. The TOT revenue would not necessarily have a significant help in terms of the city's general fund.
TOT must be a California term, Steve.
I'm like, I don't know what that means. TOT.
Hotel tax, occupancy tax.
Lodging tax.
Yep.
My thought with lodging taxes, with the exception of an ability to spend it on affordable housing, if you meet a certain criteria as a city, which I don't think we do, you have to spend it on what they call heads and beds, promoting heads in beds. Could we count our events and our concerts and fireworks show as that? Yes, we could. You have to, by state law, you have to appoint a lodging tax advisory committee, and any expenditures need to go through that lodging tax advisory committee first. And they're often made up of the hoteliers themselves, and so they definitely have opinions on the way lodging tax is spent.
I have one hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of trouble.
But okay, so over 6 years, and I'm seeing, you know, if there's this big hotel up there and there's events and, you know, concerts, I mean, that's a way to increase the, you know, whatever they're using to, you know, using the land there. I just thought that was.
Would they fall under the admissions or entertainment if we recommend that? But I think if someone is checking into the hotel and staying there, then that's the lodging tax, is my understanding from that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And regardless, we would get sales tax from
the hotel. Yeah.
And then all the construction, you know, the permit and things like that. There's revenue. There's all of that you're talking about. So I thought, well, boy, there's a big thing we're not talking about. So
most of the permitting revenues have come in. We're currently getting construction sales tax, though, but it's a one-time. It doesn't go on and on. I think the permit revenues came in late 2019.
I'd be interested for the ball fields. I know my kids are both Little League and soccer players, and I know that there's camps. I'm just curious how many organizations use Bastyr and what that actual breakdown would be. You know, they're all nonprofit, small, you know, NYSA and North Lake Little League. I don't think could truly afford that cost. So I'd be curious to know how many organizations actually use it, and what that out the door cost would be.
For purposes of writing this down, are you a no on this one?
Yeah, yeah.
It's okay to be no.
I'm a no. I'm a no on that one too, because they're, you know, I ran an outdoor school up there too. It's like, they're already doing that and volunteering and
Community
paying
building.
and giving the scholarships and access. They're already doing that, and so to tax that more is just going to kill those programs. So I'm voting no on that one.
And then everybody else's comment on this. Do you want to comment on this particular one?
Yeah, I would agree with Fernell and Elizabeth. It's with things like this, I think Rob brought up a good point in the beginning, especially when we were talking about the use of banked capital. If at all possible, I think we should avoid like immediately enacting a plan or thinking about things that would be hard to bring back, like a one-way decision or a two-way decision. And this might seem like a two-way decision where we could shift those funds back, right, if we decided it didn't happen, but it would be hard to get those leagues back.
Yeah.
To what Fernell just said, it's tough to revive things like that. Whereas, like some of the other taxing alternatives, you could reverse. Although I don't know if any government has ever repealed a tax, so those feel like one-way doors too.
Yeah, and one thing to on the Bastille ball fields is that the users are already paying fees. So just because we're paying $50,000 in lease doesn't mean they're not, that the leagues
Right.
are. They're paying user fees to maintain the fields, and I believe they're even helping out with the maintenance themselves.
Yes, they are. The baseball, they do all the maintenance. My husband can attest to that. So.
I can attest to that. I have my shovels in the car half the time. I always do my own fields. Hey, and that's another thing about maintenance of the parks. We haven't tapped into the schools. There's projects, there's horticulture programs. The students would love to be able to, help maintain their community, their neighborhood, their parks. We haven't even tapped into asking the students, kids, community about all of that. So I don't know where that one is, but I'm getting off top. So go back up to number 1, SROs. I'm going to do eliminating the school resource officers. I'm going to vote on to do that one. I'm really leaning towards going towards the restorative justice and mental health and teaming and building community in that way. So I want to flow that way.
Me too. Yeah.
I just want to step in and say, maybe if we did pick up the pace of it, we could get this whole thing filled out.
And then we can have more discussion. I agree.
Yep, I agree. Okay.
Lynn, on the
I don't want to have discussion. I just want to see if maybe we could get this all filled out, and then we'd be able to bring it back completed tomorrow.
To the hard ones, yeah.
Lynn?
I'm a yes on that one.
Anthony?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we've got answers on the ballpark. The cost allocation plan for the admin and overhead costs. I don't
No.
Oh, I've got it right here. So this is studied to allocate. Oh, this is an allocation. So this doesn't actually decrease the cost. It just kind of moves it around. So
yeah, it basically updates what the existing cost allocation plan is and the potential that the city may be incurring some additional costs in the general fund that it doesn't need to, that it could shift to stormwater, those type funds.
So a no would mean, clarify that for me, sorry.
Well, no, it would just mean that you wouldn't want to move forward with a cost allocation plan to do that. If you said yes, it would basically just mean that we would take a look at those costs that the general fund is incurring and start shifting more of those over to out of the general fund into those other funding sources.
Yeah.
This is Joanne. We have a cost allocation plan currently, and we shift hundreds of thousands of dollars to capital projects and to surface water utility to cover administrative costs in the general fund. And I think Steve is indicating that we could make it, by enhancing that plan, we could recapture even a little bit more. So
just before we talk anymore, is there anybody who's interested in exploring this option more, or can I assume everybody's not?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Michael is. Okay.
I want to make sure we understand completely what Joanne is telling us, and maybe that I do. Joanne, if we are able to reallocate from the general fund, for instance, to a capital fund, is there a separate revenue source associated with it that expense would now come out of?
Often those other revenue sources are grants, federal, state grants, as well as the restricted capital resources we use, like REIT and impact fees on those projects that we are able to then, but generally we like to do it where there's grant revenue involved, so that there's no net, it's not just a shift, we're actually recovering it through the grant.
Right, so we're actually tapping into additional outside revenue source that we wouldn't have if we hadn't done the reallocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another example is the Surface Water Utility Fund. That's its own separate enterprise fund. It's supposed to be a standalone, self-sustaining utility. And so, for example, they occupy office space here at City Hall. We don't charge them, quote unquote, rent for being here at City Hall. Could we? Yes, we could. We could charge their share on a per square footage basis of what they use at City Hall and charge that to the Surface Water Utility Fund and therefore take pressure off the general fund. What does that mean for Surface Water Utility? It means that they have to make do with what they have, right? They're a zero-sum game too. It might mean that they build less capital projects. It may mean that they inspect less facilities because they don't have many interns that summer. They'd have to make adjustments if we charged them more.
So Michael, did you have just a preliminary? We can always come back to this and discuss it more if there, but where you were at now, where are you thinking?
I still would think that's a good place to go, because if nothing else, it puts the expenditure in the control of the people who are actually spending the dollars. So that as they make their decisions, they're taking into account the fact that that is a cost that they cause to incur, and they have to give some thought to that. Whereas if they're not paying, whether it's office space or something else, they don't have that accountability, and how they use that asset could be, their behavior could be quite different without that accountability.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth?
I'm a no for right now.
Okay. For now?
I think I'm a no for right now too. I want to think about that more though.
Okay. And Anthony?
Yeah, ditto. Diving into it a little bit deeper, but I could say a no for right now.
Oh, I like that better. Hesitate no.
Hesitate no.
Give me a hesitate no.
Just so these numbers at the top, this is all the yes. So I included some of my hesitant yeses to include up here, and this is just the explicit yeses. And we're aiming for 1.8 million just to hit baseline, but we want to hit 2.8 million if we want to fully fund our maintenance.
Yeah.
So we're really aiming for that 2.8 million, even if we stair step them over the next couple of years, but we really want to aim for that 2.8 at some point as part of the plan. So, okay.
Jeff, I love your brain. Go, go, go. You got it. Well, now you made it fun. Go ahead, let's hit that target.
We're going to turn this into a game. All right. Reduce maintenance costs for Log Boom and Waterfront Park. So this is low to moderate success. And this is, so this is thinking about contracting or seeking concessionaires to operate active water sport facilities. So this is a lot of these, such as the ones we just discussed. This one as well is kind of a do an analysis, get a proposal, and see if there's cost savings, and so that's where a lot of the low moderate comes from is do the study and see. Okay, so for analysis, yes. Any other?
I'm a yes on that.
I'm a yes.
Yep. Okay.
I'm a yes.
I'm a no.
Okay. Reorganize the city's org structure.
Okay, on the Log Boom Squires thing.
Yep.
So just my 2 cents. You guys do what you want, but this one point where I disagree with Steve. I don't think we'll see much savings. And I've talked to my public works supervisor about it, and she doesn't think there'd be a lot of savings through
Through contracting.
And, she feels like the private sector contracts have just gotten more and more expensive, and they're required to pay prevailing wage. And the way you can save money through contracting is through seasonal services, like you know, if you have maintenance, if you only need to maintain it in the summer and things like that. And it is true that parks maintenance needs go up in the in the growing seasons. So she doesn't think that she could save a lot by contracting that out, just based on her experience. But again, I'm not trying to like that idea. I think if you think it's worth looking into, then keep it.
I want to just clarify or ask for clarification. I'm assuming that reduction in maintenance costs would not result in a reduction in service levels. So if we can receive the same service level for a lower price, then I would say it's worth looking at. We've got to prove that that could happen, but I wouldn't want to reduce service levels to reduce the cost.
I think there's also just one thing to keep in mind is that the staff has a limited amount of time to get proposals and do research and things like that. So we'll have to keep that in mind too on what we recommend. Okay. All right. Any other comments on number 4 on the not? We will move to the org structure. So this is I'm going to assume that you all read this or had a look at this. The suggestions were nuanced and kind of shifting, and might be good to get Rob's perspective here. But just some of this elimination and shift in reporting and reclassification overall. So let's go and get kind of a yes/no on these.
Well, how about this for a minute? Lynn, you had been on August 11th against this, and you said tonight you looked at it again and you thought there was some creativity. Maybe you should just explain that for a minute to give everybody else a little bit more context.
Sure. I agree with what was said earlier, that when you essentially just reduce city staff, ultimately it does have a negative impact in the long run. So I always want to really be careful about that. And increasing turnover is bad for the city. We know the city is going to grow. We will need that capacity. So many reasons, but this reorg did balance with adding a position where it's desperately needed. And so I appreciated seeing that. But also I would echo what Steve said about the high level of administration in one particular area, that being development and is it community planning? That's a high level of administration for a small city, and I think that there is an efficiency to be had there. So the combination of factors that they have, I think, are well thought out. Yeah, having said that, those are just my thoughts.
Okay, I think that's helpful. So Elizabeth, or for now Anthony, Jeff? I guess Jeff, you've already commented. Hesitant, yes.
I made my comments earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hesitant yes as well, only because of the current climate. And I think with the business incubator called out in there, it sounds like that's not moving forward as something being supported by the city, but also that events and recreation coordinator position there too. And right now we're not doing anything with those. So maybe that's something that is removed because of the current climate, but could be added back later, because I think that's an important position in terms of building community for our citizens to have events with the city.
Can I weigh in? Oh,
yeah.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is another case of me being an independent consultant making recommendation. I have an outstanding management team, and it's taken a long time for us, well, how do I say this? This management team gets more and more cohesive and effective as a group as time goes on, and we've invested a lot of time in working well together as a team. And they're really clicking, and they have been clicking for quite some time. It would be, as you can see, one of the things in this reorganization structure is having my development services director become an assistant director under the community development director. Quite frankly, that would be a slap in the face. I'd probably lose him if that happened. I don't want to lose him. Also, the elimination of the assistant city manager position. So people, when people take a job, when they get hired on by their employer, they make major life decisions. What about buying a house, kids in their schools, what church they go. I mean, the job and where you take that job has major ramifications across your whole life. And I'm not the kind of person who is into eliminating positions and laying off people. And my assistant city manager is awesome. She gets a ton of work done for me and for the organization. I rely heavily on her. Now, if one of my department heads ever retired or took another job elsewhere, would I look at ideas like this? You bet I would. But disrupting people in their lives and the major decisions that go along with taking a job, I just don't think is the right thing to do. The other thing is, I don't think this is proposing to take out the events person or anything. I think
It
it's
was somewhere, but again, I agree with you that I don't think cutting staff is the answer. I agree with Lynn and Jeff on that, but that was, you know, a seasonal position, or at least for events.
I think it just changes the reporting relationship, if I'm not mistaken, for that position.
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, just because I see so much hierarchy and positions. I see things that aren't represented. I don't see enough representation. Would like to see, just like at school, I want to see representation in my leadership. And so, yes, being displaced and jobs and life changes, that happens, you know, all around. Gentrification, it happens all the time. And that's not fun, but I'm pushing back because everybody can always look at how we're representing ourselves, our city, our school. All of that needs to have some representation and some equity in that. And so I'm just pushing for that. That's all. So what would that make my answer?
Yes.
Yes. Just, and I do agree with Lynn and you, Rob, about when you have, you know, qualified folks, you want to do your best to keep them there and their expertise there. But you've got to make room for representation, equity, adjustment, and to be able to do things more efficiently with the community you've got here. There's tons of people in our community we're not even using. So that's why I'm pushing to say, oh, we could look 6 years, that'll look old. That should look way different in 6 years.
Anthony, do you want to add your opinion?
Yeah, I think going off what Rob said, I think it's really hard for an outside committee, right, who's looking at like budget lines to like weigh in on something that could be about like the functions of the team that runs the city and people's performance. So like, you know, I'd like to look for other ways to do this without, you know, from a very far place away, making recommendations about, you know, people's jobs or people's reporting structures. To me, that just seems like a really difficult group of decisions to make for an outside team. So I would be a no. unless we came out with like a very clear cut and like supported restructuring that was going to save us a ton of money.
I'm still a no. Well, I am a no on this, even though I hadn't made an opinion on it earlier.
I tried to grab it early.
I am also concerned about the unintended consequences. I think you can move items around on an organization chart and think that there's going to be, and you may be right, whoever could be right in saying that, but I don't know that we have enough evidence to say that right now. And I think that a lot more thought would have to go into this before you'd make this kind of a radical change, for the reasons Rob says, but also for what it would do to the city as itself. We are a small city. We need this help. We do need this help in-house to make it happen. And I just don't understand, in what I read already, that we've given good thought to what the unintended consequences of that would, and what we would lose as a result of these things.
Okay. Well, should we leave it there the way it is for tonight, and then just try to get through more of these before we adjourn? Because we will be coming back to all of this tomorrow to look at all the different trade-offs and the figures that Jeff's putting above too. So seek alternate jail providers. Michael, do you want to?
Sure. Let's take a look at it. Again, there's a number of these. It's hard to say yes or no. But really, a lot of these, I think Jeff himself also talked about, these are, let's look at this. And so I have a hard time saying we're going to look at it and then putting a fiscal impact on it until that work is done. But I would say, yes, this is something we could certainly seek to take a look at. Whether it would be fruitful or not, to be seen.
Yeah, and just a little bit of history there. We used to send our prisoners to Snohomish County Jail, and that was cheaper, and that definitely would hit that target there that's on the spreadsheet. But a few years ago, they had some problems in the jail, and they just cleared out all the customer cities, and they said, we need to get our internal house in order. And they've been slowly letting some Snohomish County cities back, and we're always knocking on their door saying, when are you going to let us back? And we think they will someday.
One of the thoughts that had come up earlier that I don't see called out yet is the idea of over time. And this is one of those things that would take time. But thank God we've got the flexibility to do it, to partner with some other cities to see if there isn't some way we could create new capacity that would be more flexible and hopefully financially less costly to the city.
Yeah, Kirkland recently built a new jail, and I've had a couple conversations with the Kirkland city manager about letting us participate in their jail. But again, they're not ready for us.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah. Lynn,
all right.
Good word.
All right, let's get answers here, and then I think I want to move on to the revenues with the time we have left. So let's.
Yeah, I'm a yes. Just I guess keep the conversation going.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm gonna skip these two because it's 20,000 and low and undetermined for these, and I'd like to focus on the big numbers down here in the revenue section, if everybody's all right with that. Okay, and so for the utility tax, the report grouped them all and had kind of these sort of optioned plans, increase the electric gas tax rate with the cable utility tax. And what I did is I took the table that was provided down here and took these dollar amounts and applied them to these separate lines so we can kind of think about electric and water and cable and phone and solid waste separately. I don't know how we want to start.
Well, I'm a for sure yes for solid waste, phone, and cable.
Okay.
I am too.
I think with those bigger utilities like electric and gas and the water, sewer, stormwater, I really think it's important to take into account low-income families and how they could manage an increase on that.
Agreed.
Okay. Which way would you lean? Would you lean sort of a hesitant yes as long as we're
Yeah,
heavily
I think I'd
considering those?
be a hesitant yes as long as we're taking into consideration that we would be able to provide help for those families. I wouldn't want to do it if it was disproportionate.
I would be in favor of equalizing the existing rates to the community standard, provided we had an effective and reasonably cost-effective way of administering a rebate and discount program for all of these.
Lynn?
I'm a no on those two.
Okay. And did I capture cable? These three?
I'm a yes on cable, yes on phone, yes on solid waste.
And Michael, did you have any? What did you want to state your preference in? Did you have any comments on these?
I'm the same across the board on all of the utility options.
Okay.
So it'd be a conditional yes, assuming we had an effective and cost-effective as well as administratively effective rebate and discount or discount program.
Conditional yes, I like that.
I like that better.
I just jump in. I hate to keep jumping in, but one thing I think you've heard us say before, but I just want to double check is both cable and phone, we're seeing declines in those revenues because we're not allowed to tax the internet. So for cable, we can only tax the video portion, and people are more and more cutting their coax cable to their TV because they're streaming instead. So we're seeing decline in cable, and we're also seeing declines in both landline phones and cell phone utility taxes. Joanne, feel free to correct me.
Steve, did you contemplate that decline at all?
Yeah, we tempered the what the growth factor would be in the out years. You know, when the way that we did it was, you know, putting them all together, as you saw, with the different options, and so we tempered the growth factors to about 1 or 1.5%, because we've typically seen 3% or so on the electric and gas side, the other ones, but that one would be a flat line or even a drop. The counter to that could be, and Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Sling TV? They pay a tax right now?
They pay sales tax, but it's minuscule compared to what a franchise or utility tax would be. And yes, what Rob was saying, phone and cell are worse than flat. They're declining. Not many people even use their cell phones for voice. They use their cell phones for data and communicate that way. And we can't tax that.
Okay. And for now, did I catch that? Were you conditional on this one, or did you have no?
I think I'm a no on that one. I like the conditional yes, but I think I'm going to hold tight to a no for a bit. I want to seek some other ways before we come back to that one.
Okay, for both electric and gas and water. Okay.
Yeah, those two.
Okay. And Anthony.
Yeah, I would echo Michael and Elizabeth's statements. I agree with them.
Okay, so I will put you a conditional yes. Okay. Any other comments on utility before we move on to photo traffic enforcement?
Yeah, keep going. It's 8:53, so.
All right. We're good.
I'm a yes.
I'm a yes on that.
I'm a yes.
Okay. I think we had some good discussion on that. Is there anybody else that wanted to make any comments on here that we should? Okay, great.
One side note is I talked to Lake Forest Park. You know, they have several traffic cameras. They said that their photo enforcement revenue right now is in the tank because of the pandemic. So any revenue that we would assume would need to be recovery scenario after the pandemic.
It may never recover completely because
that was a really good point.
Yeah.
We may have to assume something less than the pre-pandemic estimate that Lake Forest Park gave us.
What this speaks to me is the fact that timing and that staging strategy is going to be very important to what we pick here in balancing this. I think just as Rob said, we need, it may be a long-term, 3 or 4 years out, may be a good viable financial strategy. Year one, it wouldn't. So I think we need to be, whoever's making these decisions in the end is going to have to be very sensitive to the fact of what's really achievable in the early years and what may be able to come on board later in the out years. Otherwise, we're not going to hit the target.
maybe tomorrow we can fill out a timing column and kind of have a near-term versus long-term designation for some of these.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I was thinking, is we could add a column in here that would say, is this a feasible long-term? Is it feasible near-term? So we could provide some input as we go along to which we should be thinking about first and the timing for doing those. And also triaging the work that needs to be happening on these. As we pointed out before, any of these are going to take significant staff and or consultant time. So timing that, I think, is going to be important.
Agreed. Okay, let's keep moving with the few minutes we have left here. Excise, the property tax. So this is the banked capacity of property tax.
Lynn, you said yes to that before, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay, Michael?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yep.
Pernell?
Yes.
And Anthony?
Yeah.
Okay. Admissions tax. Unless anybody wanted to throw a couple notes in there, but I think it's good. It'll be good to.
Yes.
Pace.
Yes.
And
Yes.
as you may know, the main contributors to that would be the bowling alley and the golf course.
Okay.
Yes.
Anthony?
Yes.
Sorry,
Jeff. Yeah, I'm never sure if you're looking at the screen or not. I'll keep chiming in. I try not to talk over anybody.
Okay, B&O tax. Yeah, let's, Michael? Michael, you're on mute.
What I started to say was that's really hard for me to say a clear yes or no on this, because I really don't, I'm unsure about what the economic impact of this would be. One of the strict long-term economic strategies we have is to encourage new commercial into the city. If we're going to be taxed outside or above what the community rate is elsewhere, we would be discouraging that and probably shooting ourselves in the foot. So if somebody could help me understand whether this would put our B&O tax, make us uncompetitive relative to surrounding communities, I need to know that before I would be able to say a firm yes or no.
I'm trying to remember. I know Lake Forest Park has a B&O tax. Seattle does. Shoreline just implemented one in 2019. Bothell does not. I don't know about Kirkland.
Pretty sure.
You think they do, Lynn?
I know we have a head tax, believe it or not, because there's all that controversy in Seattle about a head tax. We definitely have a head tax.
Yeah, we didn't see a B&O tax. That's actually on page 55, the PDF file of the report. Mercer Island, Lake Forest Park, Shoreline have it. And Kenmore does. It's just that Kenmore is only exercising that to heavy manufacturing type businesses, 2 of them, right?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. All the other cities in the comparator group did not have one. A B&O tax, as you mentioned, Lynn, there may be a head tax. That's a different issue. So,
Could we get just the roll call on this, and then we can.
Oh, I'm a no on that one.
I'm a no.
Fernell, you're on mute.
And no as well, just need more understanding around that too, but no hesitation. There we go. Thank you.
And Anthony.
Yeah, I'm a no. I want to make sure that we can continue to compete against those other cities listed there, and grow our revenue streams. That's the real way to make sure that we don't, as you said, have to do this again in 5 years.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Anthony.
With the information just shared, I would go to a no.
Me too. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, right. Like especially Bothell and Woodinville.
Yeah.
You look at all the like underdeveloped property we have along State Route 522. We should be welcoming retail.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. I think we're at 9 o'clock.
Well, I have one idea. If you could actually devote 10 more minutes, what about no talking except for just to say yes or no, just to get these recorded? Then because we will come back tomorrow to look at all of this. And just to go a little bit further, I do appreciate, and I think that the idea about doing a timing column is excellent. What about even, I don't know who would do this, but maybe it's Steve. I don't mean to give you more work, but what about the strong yeses where you're all in consensus and even doing a cost on that to see, well, where are you? But that's for a little bit later, not now. But just if you could quickly get through this, I think this would be really a good springboard for tomorrow.
I would love to stick around and finish this up.
I'm fine to do that.
Yep, me too.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, this is a user fee study to adjust development services. This is, I believe this is to, just to make sure that we're capturing all of the fees, all of the costs, and passing them on to those that are paying the fees. Yep, the builders.
Yeah.
So
increasing the cost recovery level for development services, yes.
Got it.
okay, all right. So Michael.
Yes.
Lynn?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Okay. Okay, and these are all these 3 are the same one. It's just how much. So this would be this is a property tax levy lid lift. So this is property taxes, and this would have to be voted on by the public, and how much we decide to go to the public to vote for impacts how much we would get. So
would this be in addition to the banked capacity?
Well, I mean, not necessarily, okay. But I think you assume that if you would do this, it would be after the banked capacity.
This is going beyond the bank capacity, yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So, Michael.
Yes. Choosing between what the level is, I think, is a further analysis to show where we are in terms of balancing the budget. But
okay, so I'm going to do a yes and then maybe a hesitant yes on these other 2. And Lynn?
I'm a no on all 3.
Okay.
I think I'm a no.
And for now?
I'm a yes.
Do you have a sense of how much?
The 10 cent.
To the 10. Okay. Anthony.
Yeah, I'm a yes.
And do you have a?
I would say 15A.
Okay, so yes here and then no on the additional. Okay. And then the 0.2% sales tax that would be dedicated to the Transportation Benefit District for additional funding. Michael?
I'm in the same place here. I'd say yes to both this and number 17, but I see these as balancing, as the fulcrum point where we balance the budget at the end. So how much that would be, actually, I take that back. I think it's a mandated 0.2. So yes, I'm yes for all of these.
Okay.
I'm a no on both.
I'm a yes and a no.
Yes and a no. Or wait, establish district to fund park operating. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes on both. I'm sorry.
On both. Okay. And just for a refresher, the park district, that would be setting up a separate board. They would be able to do a tax levy and kind of manage the parks and the funding separately from the city, is what I understand.
If I could jump in, so if the Metropolitan Park District, if its boundaries were exactly the same as the city boundaries, then the city council could choose to be the board of that Metropolitan Park District. But it would be its own separate entity with its own taxing powers and its own board of directors. But like I said, if it followed the city boundaries, then the city council could be that board.
Would that mean that we wouldn't have to pay them more, or
Yes, it would. The concept is that the cost gets shifted now to this park district. It needs to now figure out how it's going to be able to pay for those costs. It would do a levy to do that. Then the question is, what will Kenmore do? Will Kenmore reduce its tax revenues? Because then if it reduces the levy lift by that amount, then the net wash is zero and doesn't really give you any fiscal impact. So the key is really that the city would continue to levy its tax, but it's now shifted the cost of the park district to this of the parks to a separate district, which would then levy. And who pays? The property owners pay.
Yeah. Okay. And Anthony,
Plain and simple, that's what happens.
Oh, that's complicated. Okay.
I'll say a hesitant yes to both. I'm a little bit behind on my homework, so looking forward to diving into, especially the second one, the park district, to dive into that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do a hesitant yes on that one too, and get some more homework on that one. That sounded a little more complicated than I thought it was. It's simple. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. So I will send this out to the task force members. So, and feel free if you want to change your answers, and we can go through them, and we can just quickly go through the changes and the structured discussion tomorrow. I think that would be good, but I'll make sure to send this out so everybody has what we're looking at.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Did you choose to not go and discuss the service level reductions?
I don't. Ooh. You know, I might not have included that in my spreadsheet. That's right. I did not get, when I was building the spreadsheet, I did not include those. sorry, Steve. I just
no, it's all right. So you guys can tackle that tomorrow, I guess, if you want, and I can send that to you in an Excel, so that way you can just copy paste and go.
That would be.
Because we don't have the ability in this thing to do a chat file transfer, so.
Let's see. So this is service. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, since I'm not prepared for this second. maybe we save this section for tomorrow.
Excuse me.
Fine, you've made a lot of progress right now.
I just wanted to mention to folks that I can only attend for a very short period of time tomorrow. I have another commission meeting tomorrow night that requires my attendance. But I'll definitely be on for the short period that I can, and I'll send my notes to Jim as well. And then I guess the other thing I want to say is thank you to everybody for really thinking all of this through. I appreciate that. And all of my opinions, our opinions may not be the right answer, but they may not be the wrong answer either. And I don't think we'll need all of these solutions. Clearly we don't. We only need a small number of them. So just because many of us say yes or no doesn't necessarily mean that we would even need it.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, that if you all first looked at where did you all say emphatically yes, that might be kind of the floating of a priority or a consensus to the top.
Yep.
Agreed.
Okay, it's 9:10. Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well done.
Glad it was helpful.
Very. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're adjourned for the evening. We'll be reconvening tomorrow at 6:30. Jeff's going to send out the materials to everybody. I think we can keep the agenda the same. It's pretty broad, so I'm not going to make changes to it, but it's already been published. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much.